of federal law and potentially obstructing justice as somehow normal, which it most certainly is not.
Throughout this journey with this new administration, we are navigating the complicated power relationship between local, state, and federal governments. And that's part of the beauty of our Constitution. That's part of the beauty of our democratic form of government.
It's not that complicated. But her case for harboring illegal immigrants was further undercut by deadly developments in Denver.
Inside those flames is a 57-year-old man trapped inside the cab of his semi-truck, hit by a suspected drunk driver. Denver police say Ivan Zamaripa Castaneda ran from the crash, leaving the driver to die. Authorities say the 26-year-old is also in the U.S. illegally. U.S. Immigration and Customs agents want to deport him back to Mexico, but the Denver Sheriff Department, in charge of the jail, is refusing to detain him should he post the $25,000 bond, telling Fox News that unless ICE gets a federal criminal warrant, it, quote, will not honor civil detainers as it is considered unconstitutional.
Let's discuss all this with immigration attorney Alan Orr, who's joining us from Washington. Alan, thank you much for coming in this beautiful evening, and you're a very accomplished immigration attorney. When you see these stories, when you hear about this, what's wrong with trying to protect Americans by taking people that are not only here illegally, but they are committing crimes? This is the criminal element. And what I'd love to have in this few minutes that we have together is just talk about the criminal element, the criminals. Not everybody, just the criminals.
Well, I just think the criminals is such a small part of the large group that you're sort of trying to isolate. And even with the case that you sort of spoke about tonight with the DUI, the hit and run sort of case, the fact that he's an immigrant had nothing to do with the actual accident. It's a tragedy, and we understand that. But the fact that he is undocumented really didn't have much to do with that.
But doesn't it have everything to do with it? If he is indeed here illegally and he indeed committed that crime, don't you believe that that crime would have never happened if we had actually locked down the border and he never came across our borders illegally?
That's absolutely preposterous because, as we all know, hit and runs are on the incline in all over the United States. So
but if that person is not in the United States, if he's not here in the first place, you're telling me that he still would have committed that crime in Denver if he didn't do it?
Absolutely. That's a fallacy to say that if all people who are undocumented were not here, we would not have hit and runs. So, of course, there would be hit and runs.
I didn't say there wouldn't be any hit and runs. I'm saying that person, if he did do it, wouldn't have killed that other person who died in that truck accident.
That's a possibility of extremities that I really can't say for you.
A possibility? That's a reality for that family, is it not?
Once again, it is an absolute tragedy of what happened to the family in that incident. But a hit and run is nothing specific to immigration itself specifically.
It is if the person that committed it is here illegally.
Right. So we're actually a little bit past that because we want to sort of talk about the detainer and why the courts aren't turning him over, because he has a constitutional issue to actually be charged and why civil detainers don't really work. And so what we're sort of here is listening to is that the court has told you, Colorado is telling you that it is unconstitutional for them to hold him if he makes bond.
It's not. And I'm not buying into that argument, by the way.
It's not. Well, it's a constitutional argument. It's about law and order in this country. So therefore, since we're going to uphold the Constitution, the Fourth Amendment requires that if they want to hold him, they need to give him a criminal detainer, not a civil one. So
wait a second. Even just last week, I think it was Jennings versus Rodriguez in the Ninth Circuit determined that you can detain somebody if they're here illegally. You can detain them.
That's a confusion of the circumstances. It's not an issue of if you can detain them, it's how long you can detain them, which is a due process and constitutional issue.
Okay, let's go back to this case. Let's go back to
the Supreme Court did not say you could hold them indefinitely. What the Supreme Court said was that they didn't agree with the reading that California said, that it would be 6 months and then you would get to be over here.
Now, I know you're not the attorney in this case, but based on the facts that we're seeing in the news reports, do you think the Denver sheriff should hold this person and let ICE know that he's there so that they can detain him rather than releasing him out into the streets of Colorado?
Well, I believe the international news and the newspapers, ICE knows that he's there, right? I mean, so that's really not an issue. Does ICE know that he's there? So the issue is really, is ICE coming
somebody
to get him or
outside the door? I mean, do you think Denver sheriff has an obligation, duty, when they're asking, the ICE is asking to have him detained? Do you think they should do that or not do that?
Well, the Denver has asked them to give them the criminal reason for why they should detain him, which is his constitutional right. So without giving him that information, they're absolutely correct. They should not detain him.
ICE is saying we have reason to believe, we have probable cause.
There are 11 million people that are here undocumented. So the Constitution, if someone is here It's a civil penalty. It's not a criminal detention. So it's not a matter of having each and every person. So what you're sort of saying is you're going to pick everybody up and put them where?
No, I'm talking about the criminal element. Again, I want to focus 80,000 times under President Obama. There were people that were here illegally, committed another crime, got convicted of those crimes, and rather than deporting them, they released them back out into the United States. Do you think that's a problem?
So what exact crimes are we talking about? I see that's where we can't sort of mix crimes together.
No.
Are we talking about civil penalties?
It shouldn't matter.
Drugs?
It shouldn't matter.
It shouldn't matter? Really? It shouldn't matter?
Well, it's everything from homicide to rape to DUIs.
I think that's the extreme end of it. It also could be such things as a traffic violation, a speeding ticket, right? So those rare anomalies that you wish to sort of exemplify
immigration. They're not rare
immigration.
anomalies to the people who were killed or maimed or the victims of these crimes. Why should we tolerate even one of them?
Or in any other incident where the person is a U.S. citizen, those things are still anomalies, right?
I'm not talking about, I'm talking about people illegally here that commit crimes. And once they are incarcerated, they're being detained. Why not deport them? What is the case to say it's in the better interest of public safety to release them back out of the United States?
Okay, so that is not exactly what Colorado said. What Colorado said was, please give us the criminal reason why we should detain him, not a civil reason, and we will do so. So what is so hard for the federal government to provide the state with the appropriate information to meet the constitutional burden to hold someone beyond the national time of detaining
I'm telling
someone?
you that during the Obama administration, there were 80,000 times where criminal aliens were detained, and then they had a choice. America had a choice, and President Obama and his Justice Department decided to, and his Homeland Security Department, release them rather than deport them.
I understand that, but that's history. So we're not talking about the Obama administration. We're in the Trump administration and a year into that.
But Donald Trump is trying to do the right thing, and you've got the mayor of Oakland saying, no, we don't have any, you shouldn't help. And the legislature in California is saying, you shouldn't cooperate.
We're talking about the Constitution. We're talking about the Constitution and unfair detaining someone on a civil penalty, right? Why can't the federal government provide the appropriate documents to meet the standard that the state needs to detain the person? That's a very simple thing to do.
And they can detain them. But you know what? You have places like California and sanctuary cities where they choose to just release them rather than cooperating with ICE.
That is not what California decided to do. That is not what the mayor did. The mayor did not go to individual people and say, look, ICE is coming for you. The mayor said, here to the general public, please be aware that this is taking place. Do not be afraid. No need to run and hide. So it was a civil public announcement, just like anything else that ever happens, right?
No, it was a call to go run and hide. It was ICE. Hey, guess what? We're coming after the criminals. And if you got something coming for you, guess what? ICE is coming your way, and they did hide.
There were 121 arrests during this raid.
Yeah, and they missed a couple hundred other ones.
But
to proceed with Larry Korb of the Center for American Progress and Fox News foreign policy analyst Kyron Skinner. Thank you both for being here. We really do appreciate it. What are the perils? What are the problems? What are the challenges? And what minefields potentially lay out there? Larry?
Well, I think the real question is, what are your preconditions and what will happen when you make a deal if you do? For example, let's say Kim agrees to give up all of his nuclear weapons. The question is, how are you going to verify that? It takes a couple of years to set up an inspection regime, as we saw in Iran, and even then the president doesn't think it's that good. And North Korea is much more difficult to inspect. What will you do if you don't come to an agreement? Then what next? Because Kim has been legitimized. I mean, this is a ruthless dictator who, does horrible things to his own people. And now you have met with him, something he's been trying with the last 4 presidents who turned him down. So he walks away with something. I think you should have thought of that. And even today, they kept sending different messages. Some preconditions, no preconditions. What's your plan? Normally, when you have heads of state meet, you have negotiators ahead of time work out things.
But you do believe that the president is doing the right thing and that he should actually take this meeting?
Oh, yeah, I think he should, but I think he needs to do it in the right way and lessen the risks.
Now, Kyron, what's your take on this? The president doing the right thing here?
I think so, and I disagree with Larry Korb, the way he's presented it. I don't think the dangers and pitfalls exist as much as many of the detractors are trying to say for this particular reason. At least since 1992, we've had discussions going on with the North Koreans at lower levels in the U.S. government, and they ended up in an inconclusive way. Because we're dealing with an authoritarian regime, really a totalitarian leadership, it's important that the top of the U.S. government be involved in the initial discussions with the North Korean leader. So what looks unconventional, I think, really reflects the reality of the failed policy of more than a couple of decades. And we're going into this, maybe there are different messages coming out of Washington and out of North Korea as a result of this, unusual announcement and an unusual approach. But the fact remains that the U.S. remains committed to degrading North Korea. It's going in with the history behind its back and having learned lessons of all the failures of negotiations in the past.
Larry, why do you think we even got to this position? I mean, it seems that the one thing that has changed is President Trump. He's actually taken a very aggressive stance. He's used unconventional communication, if you will. Do you give him some credence to that, or is there any belief that that is actually what drove the North Koreans to the table?
Well, I think there's two things. One, he has reached a point where he is ready to go nuclear. Since President Trump's come in, he's had 22 tests, various things. So he is where he wants to be. And the question becomes now, what next? And if he's willing to give this up, even if you can verify it, the question, what is he going to want in return? Is he going to ask us to take our troops out of South Korea, for example? Those are questions that we need to think about before we get in there. And Kyron is right. I mean, we've had negotiations that haven't worked. But even again, you don't want the president to go in and make a mistake, because it's not like a lower level person making a mistake. If, he does it, then it's very hard to undo.
Kyron, does it matter where this happens? I mean, the optics are such a big part of this, but you really want to get to the substance of what's happening. Where should they do this?
I don't think it really matters, but it would be, I think, appropriate and interesting to do it on the Korean Peninsula. I think it would send a major signal to the Asian partners if it happened there. But let me just speak to the point about the president and then making mistakes. The president is not going into negotiations with Kim Jong-un. He's going into discussions and talks. And if you go back to the Reagan administration, there was no possibility of getting the first nuclear disarmament agreement of the Cold War had it not been for Reagan and Mikhail Gorbachev building a personal relationship and talking, and Reagan talking with other Russian leaders, such as Anatoly Dobrynin during those years. So I think that we've got to also give the president a kind of wide latitude here, because he's just going to talk and begin to lay the groundwork for the negotiations that will follow.
Yeah, but Reagan never did it without George Shultz and Cap Weinberger. Tillerson yesterday said he didn't think we ought to have negotiations. That same day, the president contradicted him. That's what I worry about. What kind of message are we sending? It's
well, listen,
not unified.
I think this is a positive step forward. I thank you both for your expertise on this topic. We hope to have you back. And again, thank you for joining us tonight.
Okay. Kyron, nice to see you.
We have an update out of California coming out of our Los Angeles bureau. There's been a hostage situation, as we've been reporting on Fox News, and we have Will Carr, who's in our Los Angeles bureau, to give us an update.
And Jason, we've just learned from our correspondent Adam Housley from two different members of law enforcement that all of the people who were being held hostage are now dead, including the gunman as well. Evidently, according to our Adam Housley, the numbers are a little fluid with this, but it does sound like it's been a tragic ending to a long day there on the ground. We'll take you back. This started around 10 a.m. this morning when a man walked into the largest veterans home in the country armed with a gun. He walked into a dining room. There was a party going on. He let some people leave, but he held a number of hostages. That led to police swarming the area. They shut everything down. There was a SWAT standoff. There was a hostage negotiation. They tried to negotiate. We know that they could not get in touch with the gunman for a long time. And now again, our Adam Housley reporting that the gunman is dead and at least two of the hostages dead as well. They're trying to figure out if indeed there was a third hostage, as we've been reporting throughout the course of the day. Jason.
Will Carr coming from California. Some tragic news. Thanks for your report. We appreciate it. Stay with us because newly released audio tapes raise new questions about the police response to the Stoneman Douglas.
We don't have any description yet. We just hear shots, but appears to be shots fired. Alex, do not approach the 12 or 1,300 buildings. Stay at least 500 feet away at this point.
The deadly shooting that killed 17 people is leading students from around the country to push for more gun control. But one student from Stoneman Douglas High School is launching his own effort to prevent school shootings. Kyle Kashuv discussed his ideas with President Trump yesterday, and he's joining us this evening. Thanks so much for being here.
Thank you for having me.
What was it like to meet the President and the First Lady?
It was quite amazing. They were so outgoing and welcoming and really responsive.
Did he know the subject? I mean, what did he ask you about?
Of course he knew the subject. We talked about what implementations and my opinions about the subject and what I thought was best to do.
Now, when you see and hear these recordings, I mean, I can't imagine going through this, and I'm sorry, as a young man, that you had to go through this. But when you hear those recordings and you know that there was somebody armed with a gun there at the facility, what runs through your minds when you hear that recording?
Look, it's absolutely terrible that they let the students in the building be sitting ducks while he had an armed weapon, and he could have went inside, and he let the shooter roam free in the halls knowingly. So it's seemingly he waited for everyone to simply just die in the building, only then to enter, and that's really heartbreaking.
What do you want to see happen? What do you think should really happen next?
Well, I think the Stop Prevention for Violence Act is would have prevented this completely. And I'm really proud to say that it's a bipartisan effort that's got 15 Democrats and 15 Republicans in favor of it who signed up.
Now, you've actually been up on Capitol Hill, right? You met with Senator Hatch. Who else did you meet with?
Senator Rubio, Speaker Paul Ryan, and Senator Murphy, as well as Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer.
Oh, you got the A-list. Well, that's good. And what did you tell him? I mean, give me the quick pitch. What did you tell him we needed to do?
Well, look, I talked to every single one about my concerns and opinions on the Second Amendment and what we had to do to protect it. And I specifically sat down with Chris Murphy, and we discussed what had to be done. Although we disagreed on what we had to do for gun control, we did find a common ground, and I think that was most important, as in we represented that there was a bipartisan effort to make a change, and there are issues that both the left and the right can agree on.
So where's the common ground? Where do you see that there's actual agreement?
I think the HEART bill specifically shows.
What does it do? What does it say?
Basically, it hardens students, it hardens schools, it gives the funding necessary for the technological advancements to make sure we're safe. It increases communications between the school and law enforcement. It makes proactive prevention to make sure that we can properly register students who are having mentally ill or having like mental issues that might act out.
And the governor of Florida, Governor Scott, signed a bill today into legislation. Mm-hmm. Do you agree with that bill? There
was one thing that stood out to me, and it was a big concern, because right now we have people in the military, age 18, serving and defending our country. However, we don't protect our own citizens who are legal age to vote and have the mental cognitive ability to vote to have the same weaponry. And I think that's really hypocritical.
So you don't believe that there should be two different thresholds as to where you can actually purchase a gun? Do you think the gun that age should be higher, or should it be lower? Should it be 18?
I think right now, if a voter is able to vote at age 18, that means we register they have the cognitive ability, the proper cognitive development to do so. And if they have that cognitive ability, then they should be able to also have the same rights as any other adult.
Now, there's also some proposed legislation or some thoughts on legislation that there should be able to go out and get some sort of restraining order on people that can't distinguish right from wrong. You supportive of that or not supportive of that?
Well, I'm really supportive in making sure that people who have mental disorders and not mentally stable cannot acquire weaponry, because at the end of the day, a bad guy, if you're not mentally stable, you shouldn't have a gun.
And you're developing an app to help with this. Do you have a name for it yet?
Yes, sir. It's called the Reach Out app, and what we're doing is we're allowing students from the same school develop emotional connections and solve their emotional issues in school without any federal government funding.
It's great. The state of Utah is doing that as well. And there's an app out there that where students and
86
parents,
lives saved.
86 lives saved with this app in Utah, and I hope they duplicate it around the country. I'm sorry that you and your friends, and you're too young to have to have gone through this, but thank you so much for being here.
Thank you.
Thank you. In a related development, the NRA immediately filed suit today to block a new gun control law just signed by the governor of Florida, Governor Scott.
So after reviewing the entire bill, I had to ask myself, will this bill make a huge investment and dramatically improve school safety in hopes of never seeing another tragedy like this again? Will this bill provide more funding to treat the mentally ill? Will this bill give far more tools to keep guns away from people who should not have them? The answer to all three is yes.
Not everyone thinks the answer is yes. And joining me from Orlando is Republican Congressman Ron DeSantis. Ron and I served in the United States Congress together. We were on the same oversight committee as well as the Judiciary Committee. He is also now running for the governor of Florida. So, Congressman DeSantis, thanks so much for joining us.
Hey, Jason. Good to see you.
So the governor signed a bill. Would you, if you were elected governor, would you have signed that bill?
I think I would have approached it a little bit different. I think certainly the school security, I think, is long overdue. The money for mental health and then being able to identify these individuals who are dangerous so that they're not able to possess weapons. I think all those are good. I think when you start getting into some of the blanket restrictions on people's Second Amendment rights, I think that that is constitutionally vulnerable. I think those lawsuits are probably going to succeed. I mean, think about it. You have an enumerated right in the Bill of Rights. There's really no precedent to just do a blanket ban on certain adults. I mean, we wouldn't say that if you're 18 to 20, you don't have a Fourth Amendment right and police could search your house without a warrant. We wouldn't say that they could seize your property without just compensation and that the Fifth Amendment doesn't apply. So I think that was problematic. I don't think that provision will actually prevent any gun crimes. But here's the thing. And you know more than anybody in dealing on the oversight, we worked together for years. This, between the locals in Broward County and between the federal with the FBI, was the most catastrophic failure of government that I've witnessed since I've been in the Congress or when I served in the military. You guys mentioned the different warnings that were given on the scene. Obviously, they went to the guy's house 23 times. They had ample opportunity to arrest him. They didn't do it. We then got a briefing this week in Washington from the FBI. Not only did they get a great tip in January, not only did they get a tip the previous year, 2017, in Mississippi, the caller in 2018 who took it on the FBI actually connected the two to the Mississippi one. So they knew this guy was dangerous, and they made the decision not even to alert the local authorities. And so we can argue about different laws. The fact is the laws that were on the books were sufficient to prevent this had government done its job.
Now, one of the provisions in there is in Florida, and it's available in other states, for instance, in Utah, there are teachers and school officials who can carry weapons. Are you in favor of that? Do you think that would help?
I would not mandate any teachers to carry or administrators, but what I would do is say a school should not be advertised as a, quote, gun-free zone. If you have, maybe it's just one or two faculty members who are licensed, who have a concealed carry permit, I don't think they should be prohibited from using that, bringing the firearm in a concealed way on campus. And the reason is, even if no one decides to do it, just the fact that it might be there, I think that gives a potential shooter pause. And if you're beefing up the outside security and you're hardening the schools, then guess what? The schools are no longer such an inviting target. I mean, we've kind of let these things be sitting ducks, and there's this sickness in society with some of these really demented individuals that are attracted to that. I think just saying that a concealed carry permit holder can go to
Association while giving big-time money to the pro gun control campaign. But if they want to take a stand against violence, they may want to look at their own material. A new study by the Conservative Parents Television Council finds a dramatic increase in the portrayals of violence on TV in recent years. According to the study, nearly 61% of 287 broadcast primetime television episodes featured some form of violence during their November sweeps period. 39% of those 287 shows featured gun-related violence. Let's get reaction from actor Antonio Sabato Jr., who is also running for Congress. He joins us now from Calabasas, California. We thank you so much for being here.
Thank you, my friend.
We're putting up on the screen, you can't see it, but we put up on the screen this picture of George Clooney. Mr. Clooney has been pretty aggressive about guns and his belief about gun control.
Right.
You think Hollywood's part of the solution here, or is Hollywood part of the problem?
No, they're part of the problem. Listen, these are the same people that actually believed that Hillary Clinton was going to become the president and was going to be a good president. She left our people to die in Benghazi. Let's not forget that. These are the same people that went to the Academy Awards the other day, protected by LAPD, bodyguards wearing pieces, guns all over the place at the Academy Awards. And then they're making movies on a weekly basis with guns that they want to ban. The NRA has done more to protect the American people than Hollywood could ever do. So Let's talk the truth here and make sure the American people know what's going on here. And I think they know that because we elected Donald Trump. He's doing an amazing job, and that's why I'm running for office. In November, I'm going to win because we got to bring common sense back into government and into our daily lives. I mean, we can't live with these lies every single day. The media is spilling lies 24 hours a day against our president, against the Republican Party. That's all they do. And this time, they're not going to win because the American people have woken up. We want our America back, and we got to protect our America and our Constitution.
So what do you think is Hollywood's responsibility? Should they, I mean, they're entrepreneurs. Should they just profit? I mean, the reason they make movies with guns in it is because Americans go to them and they pay money to go see them. So is it their responsibility, or should we just call out their hypocrisy? What's the right answer for Hollywood?
Well, if they want to talk about gun-free zones and always blame it on the NRA, then they are the hypocrites. But listen, right now, why don't they make more movies about positive stuff? What about family values? What about God once in a while? What about, the Ten Commandments? What about good stuff, positive stuff, loving, caring stuff? And I'm not talking about the Disney movies. I'm talking about in general. Why don't we do TV shows that involves God and family and sitting down at the table and things like that? I urge them to do that. We got to come together and talk about the real stuff here. The problems are not the guns. The problems are the people who are pulling the trigger, like what we've seen in Florida. And then we keep voting these people who are our sheriffs, our people in government who cannot protect the American people. And this happened in Florida. So right now we have to educate people and tell them the truth.
Do you think the breakdown of the family it seems to be a common denominator with a lot of these kids? They can't distinguish right from wrong. There may be some mental incompetency, may have a breakdown in the family. Does Hollywood believe in any of that?
I don't know. Listen, we have so many issues right now. The opioids epidemic. People are addicted. Kids are addicted to medicated stuff, and that's really bad. I mean, people are not sitting around with their kids anymore and talking about what's going on in your life. Can I get to know you? Do you want to get to know me? It's always about computers and phones and this and that and all these distractions. We had guns in this country for 200 years, and all of a sudden we're having these problems happening every single week. And they always want to blame it on guns. Let's blame it on people. Let's blame it on society. And let's bring love and happiness and family values back into our daily lives.
Well, listen, I thank you. I think there are a lot of kids out there that can't distinguish right from wrong. It's like a puddle of gasoline, and then they sit 15 hours and watch a video game or go watch a violent movie, and it's like throwing a match on that gasoline and kaboom.
And they're left alone. I mean, these kids are left alone. There's no more communication between the teachers and the parents anymore. Parents can now walk into a school and talk about their issues and with the school itself. All these regulations and this and that. So we're not really free anymore. They want to hold us hostage. And, we don't have Bibles in schools anymore. They wanted to take our American anthem away. We don't respect.
This is suddenly booming in America, and we got even more sensational news today. 313,000 jobs were added to the economy in February, far exceeding expectations from economists. And unemployment remained at an 18-year low of 4.1%. That all throws a monkey wrench into one industry, the professional pundits, who've been predicting a blue wave of Democratic victories in the upcoming midterm elections. Two new polls defy those hopes, one by Axios and SurveyMonkey, shows 5 Senate Democrats would lose to Republican candidates if elections were held today. And a new Marist poll has the president's approval rating at 42%, the highest he's had since he took office. Let's get reaction from Adriana Cohen, a Boston Herald columnist who's in Massachusetts with us this evening, and radio talk show host Leslie Marshall, who's in California. California seems to see things a little bit differently. So, Leslie, let me take a shot here, because there's a lot of good news out there from more people, money in their pockets in tax returns. We got good things happen on foreign policy. You got good unemployment numbers. Tell me why you think there's suddenly going to be this big blue wave.
Well, because here in California, it will be blue. It'll be a blue wave in this state, and that's a number of seats, especially in the House. Now, I have to tell you, I was once thinking it would just be the Senate that Dems would flip, and they wouldn't be able to flip the House, and I'm actually turning that around, because we certainly have some senator seats in the Democratic side that are in very red, very pro-Trump districts.
But what do they run on? What do they run on? Like, what's their
well, here's
message?
the thing. Here's the thing, Jason. No, here's the thing, Jason. That's one of the things I mentioned the other day here on Fox is that the Democrats don't have and haven't learned from the last election the unity. You know, you have still that divide between the left and the left of left, and you don't have a unified message. And I've said before, and I'll say it again to my party in here, you can't just run on, we don't like Trump, anti-Trump. That's not strong enough for any platform.
And Donald Trump's actually not on the ballot in 2018. So, Adriana, how do you see things playing out, even from the perspective of a very liberal Massachusetts?
Right, but you know, the Democrats have been obstructionists since President Trump was inaugurated, and they voted against the tax cuts, which has benefited millions and millions of Americans. They vote against regulatory reform, which is growing the economy. Everything Trump does, they obstruct, and so Democrats can't run on, on a Trump derangement syndrome. They have to actually stand for something. And if we look at the economy, it's booming. President Trump is helping women. It's helping African Americans. The unemployment rate is at an all-time low. Our economy can't get any better at this point. We have the largest workforce participation rate in decades. And so at the end of the day, Americans are going to care about the kitchen table issues, which is how much money they can put in their pocket. And the economy is booming. They don't care so much about social issues. And unfortunately, the liberals, all they care about these days is protecting criminal illegal aliens.
Now, Leslie, you have Nancy Pelosi at the top of the Democrats in the House, and you have Chuck Schumer. Is that the winning formula for Democrats? Put Nancy Pelosi and Chuck Schumer in charge?
Well, Pelosi and Schumer aren't in jeopardy of losing their seats. We have to look at who is going to be, coming up, like in San Diego, Darrell Issa's seat, or if we look further north for Devin Nunes and other people like that. Those are areas that could be flipped. Listen, let's just take Texas, okay? Right now, out of all the Republican states, out of all the red states, Donald Trump, the president, has the lowest approval rating in the state of Texas. In 1994, when we had the biggest surge in Democratic voters come out, one Democrat was able to flip a seat statewide in the big red Texas. And guess what? Over 1 million Democrats came out on Tuesday for the primary to vote. So maybe we could see, flip a little blue.
They also had record turnout. Ted Cruz didn't exactly have a whole lot of challengers, and they had a record turnout on the Republican side of the aisle as well.
But that's one of the reasons that Texas is not going to be blue. And people hear blue wave. That's what I think they think we're painting the map blue. No, we're looking at states like California that are blue. They're looking at other states that are purple. And if you can flip a couple of seats in a state like Texas, that is a definite win. And in state seats and state legislatures throughout the country, we have seen a lot of blue.
Adriana, I'm going to give you the last word. How do you see it playing out?
You know what? Rasmussen has a new poll out. 78% of all Americans say their quality of life is either good or excellent. And so why on earth would voters shift course, vote for a liberal in November who's going to raise their taxes, take their guns, take their freedom away? I mean, the economy is booming. President Trump has restored the American dream. And also, I want to say Democrats were the party that supposedly supported the working man. That's no longer the case. The Republicans are. I mean, all the unions are supporting this tariff reform. President Trump has created 3 million jobs since he got into office. 263,000 of those jobs were union jobs. They're manufacturing jobs. And so this is going to even grow even stronger with the infrastructure plan that's going to be put into place. And so I'm curious to know who...
What do you say to her when she has to make that choice? What do you say to her?
On the advice of counsel, I invoke my Fifth Amendment privilege against self-incrimination.
You can look away if you like, but I wish you could see the faces of people who cannot get the drugs that they need. I know you're smiling, but I'm very serious, sir.
Congress was united on both sides of the aisle on that day. I dismissed Scarelli after 10 minutes, as it was clear he intended to do nothing but smirk and squirm rather than testify. He then had the gall to post on Twitter, quote, "Hard to accept that these imbeciles represent the people in our government." I guess you can call members of Congress whatever you'd like. But when you raise the price of drugs on people that will die without them by 5,000%, that's something else. Well, fast forward today in a different picture. Scarelli was reportedly crying as a federal judge in New York sentenced him to 7 years in prison. He's also been ordered to forfeit more than $7 million and his coveted Wu-Tang Clan CD. He was convicted on a matter unrelated to the drug price hike, but one that still may be telling, defrauding hedge fund investors. Scarelli's attorney told the judge that sometimes he wants to hug his client and sometimes he wants to punch him in the face. I know more than a few people who'd probably prefer the latter. That's our show for tonight. I'm Jason Chaffetz. I really think Laura Ingraham, this is the 4th time I've been able to host this show, and I appreciate her confidence in allowing me to substitute host for her. It's truly an honor and a privilege, and I appreciate the dialogue and all the guests that were with us tonight. Laura Ingraham will be back on Monday, but we got a great show. You got to stay tuned to Fox News, because Shannon Bream and the Fox News night team are up next. Have a great weekend, everybody, and good night from New York. The United States is still the greatest country on the face of the planet. We appreciate you joining us.
New signs of alleged bias surface in the anti-Trump dossier. House Republicans expand their search for answers. Chief Intelligence Correspondent Catherine Herridge is here to break the story. And a bombshell allegation rocking Washington tonight. A new book alleges Susan Rice issued a stand-down order on Russian meddling in the 2016 election. The Kremlin conspiracy author Joel Rosenberg is here with analysis. And maybe it won't be before May. The White House appears to walk back a timeline for talks between North Korean leader Kim Jong-un and President Trump. Ambassador John Bolton tackles the question, is there going to be a summit or not? Hello and welcome to Fox News at Night. I'm Shannon Bream in Washington, and this is a Fox News alert. Just about the worst case scenario unfolding at this late hour after law enforcement officials spent all day trying to communicate with a gunman holding at least 3 people hostage since this morning at a large veterans home in Northern California. Will Carr joins us with the very latest. Right, Will, what do we know? It doesn't sound good.
That's right, Shannon. We've had our eyes on the largest veterans home in the country for the last 9 hours, and we just found out from authorities that everybody inside of that room that we've been keeping an eye on is actually dead. Authorities just came out and briefed the media. Take a listen to what they said.
I come before the public with some tragic news. Shortly before 6 p.m. this evening, law enforcement personnel made entry into the room where we felt the hostages were being held by the suspect, and unfortunately made the discovery of 3 deceased females and 1 deceased male suspect. This is a tragic piece of news, one that we were really hoping we wouldn't have to come before the public to give.
This started around 10 this morning in Yountville, California. We're told the gunman went into the veterans' home. He walked into a party that was going on. He actually let some of the people in the party leave, but he held those 3 women there. Some of the people who left ended up calling 911. Authorities rushed to the scene. One deputy actually exchanged gunfire with the suspect. We're told that multiple shots were fired, and then he retreated back into that room where for the last 9 hours we didn't know exactly what was going on. Now authorities are facing some tough questions about why it took them 9 hours to get inside of that room, Shannon. They're saying tonight that it's inappropriate to start talking about the tactics of all of this, but it's certainly some questions they'll have to answer in the coming days. Shannon.
All right, Will, I read that at least one account says they do know who the gunman is. They knew the identity. What do we know?
That's right. They do know who the gunman is. They also know that evidently he was part of what's called the Pathway Home Program. That's a program at the veterans home which treats post 9/11 veterans who are dealing with emotional trauma. We don't know if he was currently in that program or if he had been released from that program. We do also know that he had a rental car that was very close to the scene. Authorities evidently found that rental car. They searched it with explosive canines to make sure that there were no explosives in that car. We're told there were not, and that they only found a cell phone. Shannon.
All right, can you tell us, Will, a little bit more about this facility? I know that it's a large facility where there are people who are housed there, but you mentioned this separate program that treats veterans who are dealing with some post-traumatic stress issues. What more do we know?
That's right. This is the biggest veterans home in the country. It houses around 1,000 veterans, veterans going all the way back to World War II. And it's a bit of a one-stop shop for all the needs that veterans may have. They can get pretty much everything there. So you have to keep in mind, this is certainly very tragic for all the people involved directly with this. But you also have a number of veterans who deal with a number of issues day in and day out who have been disrupted in their daily lives here. They had to leave the premises. It's not exactly clear when they'll go back. You're talking about disabled veterans, veterans who deal with PTSD. So certainly a chaotic situation for so many people who served our country. Shannon.
Yeah, it is. And like we said, the worst possible outcome. Will Carr, thank you for reporting around the clock on this. Let us know if you get more.
You bet.
All right, President Trump taking to Twitter late tonight to reassure the world he intends to follow through on his bold agreement for an historic summit with North Korean dictator Kim Jong-un. Quote, the deal with North Korea is very much in the making and will be, if completed, a very good one for the world. Time and place to be determined. South Korea's national security advisor went before the cameras shortly before our program last night to announce that President Trump had agreed to, quote, meet Kim Jong-un by May to achieve permanent denuclearization. Now, we don't know if the May timeframe is still in play, but we do know that National Security Advisor H.R. McMaster will brief the UN Security Council on Monday. The Trump administration warning Kim is not going to get a face-to-face with the president unless he's actually prepared to give up his nuclear program.
Let's be very clear. The United States has made zero concessions, but North Korea has made some promises. And again, this meeting won't take place without concrete actions that match the promises that have been made by North Korea.
Now, that's led critics to claim the president or his advisors are walking back the plan to meet with Kim by the month of May, as the prospect of extracting concessions from the North Koreans seems pretty grim. Are the critics wrong? Let's talk about it with former U.S. Ambassador to the UN, Fox News contributor John Bolton. Ambassador, great to have you with us.
Glad to be with you.
No doubt there are skeptics about this and wondering why it's coming together so quickly. Tom Nichols, who is a professor at the Navy War College, I believe, he writes this, an opinion piece in the USA Today. He says, Kim Trump will meet. This is his prediction. Kim's regime will reap hours of footage of an American president shaking the hand of the supreme leader that will run forever in North Korea and go viral around the world. He says later, when talks fail, Kim will blame Trump, leaving the president bewildered and angry. Trump will go back to his insulting ways, which will pave the way for Kim to exit any preliminary agreements. How do you see it playing out?
I don't think it's going to happen anything like that. I mean, I think you have to look at this not based on what people read in the morning newspapers, but on the objective reality of North Korea at the present time. Number one, by all accounts, including top people in our intelligence community, they're very close to achieving a goal they've been after for 25 years or more, which is to be able to deliver thermonuclear warheads on target in the United States. They're very close, and they don't want anything that would interfere with them crossing that finish line.
So why then with the North Koreas, if they're that close, why in the world would they agree to not halt the program, to give it up completely? It just doesn't logically make any sense.
Because they're lying. You know, there's an all-purpose joke here. Question: how do you know that the North Korean regime is lying? Answer: their lips are moving. They're not going to give up achieving this objective. Why would they agree? Why would they propose talks now? Because they want to buy time, 3 months, 6 months, 12 months, whatever it is they need to get across the finish line. I think what Trump did, and certainly surprised everybody, is foreshorten that period, because I think this is potentially a meeting that begins and ends with the president saying, tell me what you're going to do to denuclearize, and Kim Jong-un saying, well, we'll have talks about this and talks about that. So it could be a long and unproductive meeting, or it could be a short and unproductive meeting. If Kim Jong-un comes in and says, you know, I've seen the error of my ways, I'm going to renounce my leadership in North Korea, go live in a villa on the seashore in China for the rest of my life, and the regime can get on without me, that would be historic but unlikely.
All right, here is what Senator Marco Rubio, of course a Republican from Florida, fears is how this is going to play out. His take.
The other thing that might be happening is he's luring us into these negotiations, but then he will make demands that he knows we can never agree to, like the U.S. abandoning South Korea. At that point, he will go to the world and say, look, I've been very reasonable. I met with the president. I've been willing to be flexible. but these guys don't want to deal with me, and that is designed to get the international community to back off of sanctions and not support a unilateral U.S. military action.
Okay, potentially setting himself up to get out of some of those sanctions. He now has video and pictures of him grinning and gripping with President Trump. And now a lot of people think he's going to have the credibility or the authority of having gotten to sit down with a sitting U.S. president. So what's the win in this for our administration?
Well, I think it's only if the president follows through on what he's been saying consistently. It shouldn't surprise anybody that he agreed to meet with Kim Jong-un, whether you like it or not. He's been saying it for a long time. So the question is whether by having this meeting and saying, in effect at the meeting, this is the way I would propose you do it, I'm glad to be here to talk about denuclearization. So tell me what ports American ships should sail into, what airports American cargo planes can land at, so we can load your nuclear weapons program onto those as soon as beginning next week. Now, if Kim thinks that by saying denuclearization, he's saying, well, we'll phase out this and we'll slow down that and we'll do the other thing, that's not denuclearization. This is a substantial change in the way the U.S. has approached this. But as I say, if you look at it as a way to foreshorten the amount of time that we're going to waste in negotiations that will never produce the result we want, which is Kim giving up his nuclear program, I think that's a good thing. I think we've got to focus on the proximity of North Korea to getting deliverable nuclear weapons. It is unacceptable that they reach that point, and rather than have the low-level negotiations rising to the mid-level negotiations, rising to the high-level negotiations, finally rising to a summit meeting, that'll be 2 years from now. They'll have deliverable nuclear weapons. That we cannot allow.
All right, Ambassador, we'll watch this play out. Thank you so much.
Glad to be here.
Good to see you. Well, the NRA announcing today it is filing a lawsuit over the new gun law in Florida signed just today by Governor Rick Scott. Meanwhile, as the shooting investigation's unfolding, we're learning new details about delays in response by law enforcement at the scene. Peter Ducey has more on that. Peter?
Ink isn't even dry yet on the just-signed Marjorie Stoneman Douglas High School Public Safety Act, but the NRA is already suing to stop this Florida law that requires gun buyers to be 21 years old instead of 18 and paves the way for teachers with certain training to carry guns if they want to. Here is the NRA's problem. Quote, Florida's ban is an affront to the Second Amendment as it totally eviscerates the right of law-abiding adults between the ages of 18 and 21 to keep and bear arms. The ban is particularly offensive with respect to young women, as women between the ages of 18 and 21 are much less likely to engage in violent crime than older members of the general population who are unaffected by the ban. Now, the spat over Governor Scott's new gun regulations comes as audio has just been unearthed that contradicts the public claims by the Stoneman Douglas resource officer who never went into the school to confront mass murderer Nicholas Cruz. That officer, Scott Peterson, has been defending himself by saying that he thought Cruz's gunshots were outside, so the protocol was to hunker down. If the shots had been from inside, the protocol would be to go in there and confront the assailant. Well, as it turns out, he knew all along that the shots were coming from inside the school.
Shutting down east on Holmberg. We need somebody to shut down Holmberg. Do not approach the 12 or 13.
The latest generation